What he found only deepened his suspicions about the official story. The timestamp on the footage showed Kira near the tech bay at 14:30. Station time. But the maintenance logs showed her clocking out of a repair job in Section 7 at 14:45. The same day? Unless she could be in two places at once or the timestamps were wrong, there was a serious problem with the evidence. Marcus expanded his search to include footage from other areas of the station during the same time period. What he discovered made his heart race with excitement and anger. At 14:30, when Kira was supposedly stealing quantum processors, she was actually visible on 3 different cameras in Maintenance Section 7, completing a routine repair on an OBD air recycling unit. Someone had deliberately tampered with the tech bay footage or created false evidence to frame her. Marcus felt sick as he realized how close an innocent being had come to being convicted based on fabricated evidence. He immediately tried to access Captain Voss's office to report his findings, but was told the Krex officer was unavailable. Left multiple messages requesting an urgent meeting, but received no response. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking toward Kira's scheduled transfer to the detention facility on Kepler Station, unable to reach Captain Voss through official channels. Marcus decided to approach the station administrator directly. Commander Sarah Mitchell was a career officer who had earned her position through competence rather than political connections, and Marcus hoped she would listen to his concerns about the case. Mitchell's office was located in the administrative sector near the main command center. Her assistant initially tried to turn Marcus away, claiming the commander was too busy for unscheduled appointments, but Marcus insisted the matter was urgent enough to justify the interruption. Commander Mitchell was a stern woman in her 50s. With graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, she listened patiently as Marcus presented his evidence about the timestamp discrepancies and the inconsistencies in Kira's case. "These are serious allegations you are making, Webb," Mitchell said when Marcus finished his presentation. "You are essentially accusing Captain Voss of conducting a flawed investigation and potentially allowing an innocent being to be wrongly convicted." "I am not making accusations about anyone's motives," Marcus replied carefully. "I am simply pointing out that the evidence does not support the charges against Kira, and she deserves a fair investigation before being transferred to detention." Mitchell studied the footage and documentation Marcus had brought with obvious interest. She was clearly troubled by what she saw, but also reluctant to challenge Captain Voss without overwhelming proof of misconduct. "I will need to discuss this with Captain Voss before making any decisions about the prisoner's status," she finally said. "In the meantime, I want you to compile all of your evidence into a formal report and submit it through proper channels." Marcus left the commander's office, feeling frustrated but somewhat hopeful that justice might still prevail. He spent the rest of the day preparing a comprehensive report documenting all the inconsistencies he had found in Kira's case. That evening, as Marcus was finishing his report, he received a message from Commander Mitchell requesting his immediate presence in her office. When he arrived, he found Captain Voss waiting with the commander, both looking grim. "Captain Voss has reviewed your evidence," Mitchell said without preamble. He has explanations for the discrepancies you identified." Voss leaned forward aggressively, his reptilian features twisted in anger. "The timestamps you question are due to routine system maintenance that required clock synchronization," he said. "The prisoner's presence in maintenance areas does not prove her innocence, since her phasing abilities allow her to move undetected through the station." Marcus felt his heart sinking as he realized Voss had prepared responses to his evidence. The explanations were plausible enough to create reasonable doubt about the inconsistencies, even though they did not fully address all of Marcus's concerns. Furthermore, Voss continued additional evidence has come to light that confirms the prisoner's guilt. "We found chemical traces on the quantum processors that match compounds used in Velani phasing abilities. This proves she handled the stolen items." This new evidence was devastating to Marcus's case, and he suspected it had been fabricated specifically to counter his investigation. However, proving evidence tampering would be extremely difficult, especially against the head of Station Security. Commander Mitchell looked apologetic but resolute. "Based on Captain Voss's additional evidence, I see no grounds for delaying the prisoner's transfer. The case will proceed as scheduled." Marcus left the meeting feeling defeated and angry. He was now convinced that Kira was innocent and being framed, but he lacked the resources and authority to challenge the official investigation effectively. The system that was supposed to protect innocent beings was instead being used to persecute them. That night, Marcus found himself unable to sleep as he wrestled with his conscience. He could accept the official verdict and move on with his life, or he could continue fighting for someone he barely knew at significant risk to his own career and safety. The smart choice was obvious, but Marcus had never been good at making smart choices when they conflicted with his sense of right and wrong. By morning, he had made his decision. If the official system would not protect Kira, then he would have to find another way to help her. He began developing a plan to conduct his own investigation while avoiding official channels that might be compromised. Marcus's first step was to gain access to the detention center where Kira was being held. As a cargo supervisor, he had legitimate reasons to visit the facility since detained workers sometimes had personal belongings that needed to be processed for shipment. He requested permission to inventory Kira's possessions in preparation for her transfer. The detention center was located in the lower levels of the station, in a section that most residents preferred to avoid. The atmosphere was oppressive, with dim lighting and recycled air that carried the smell of fear and desperation. Marcus had visited the facility before, but never to see someone he believed was innocent. Kira sat on the narrow bench in her cell, staring at the floor with vacant eyes. She looked up when Marcus approached, and recognition flickered across her features. "You are the human who asked my name?" she said quietly. "Why have you come here?" Marcus glanced around to ensure they were not being observed, then moved closer to the cell bars. "I have been investigating your case," he said in a low voice. "I believe you are innocent, and I want to help you." Kira's eyes widened with surprise, and something that might have been hope. "You believe me?" she asked incredulously. "The evidence against you does not make sense," Marcus explained. "The timestamps are wrong, and your work record shows you were elsewhere when the theft occurred. Someone is trying to frame you, but I do not know who or why." Tears began flowing down Kira's face, causing her translucent skin to shimmer like liquid mercury. "My family," she whispered. "If I go to prison, who will help them? My sister is only 12 years old, and my brother has been sick since the attacks on our world." Marcus felt his resolve strengthening as he saw the genuine anguish in Kira's expression. This was not someone who was concerned about being caught in a crime. This was someone facing separation from loved ones who depended on her. "I'm going to find out who really stole those quantum processors," Marcus promised. "But I need your help to understand how someone could have framed you so effectively." Kira wiped her eyes and seemed to gather herself together. "What do you need to know?" she asked. "Tell me about your daily routine," Marcus said. "Who has access to your quarters? When do you work? Where do you go during your free time?" Kira described her life on the station in detail. She worked long shifts in the maintenance tunnels, often staying late to earn overtime pay. She lived in the workers' dormitory in a small room that she shared with a Thren female named Click, who worked in the botanical gardens. During her limited free time, she either slept, studied technical manuals, or sent messages to her family. "Who else knew about your family's situation?" Marcus asked. "Did you tell anyone about needing extra credits to help them?" "I mentioned it to some of my coworkers," Kira said. "Bill Hendricks knew because I asked for extra shifts. I also talked to Tom Bradley, administration, when I was trying to get approval to send larger credit transfers to the refugee camps." Marcus made note of Bradley's name. As an administrator, Tom would have access to personnel files and could potentially learn enough about Kira's situation to use it against her. He would need to investigate Bradley's involvement in the case. "What about your phasing abilities?" Marcus continued. "How do they work exactly, and who knows, you can use them?" Kira looked uncomfortable discussing her species' abilities, but seemed willing to help Marcus understand. "Phasing requires tremendous energy," she explained. "I can maintain it for maybe 30 seconds at most, and then I need to rest for hours. Before I can do it again, it is not something I use casually." "Could you phase through the walls of the tech bay?" Marcus asked. "Theoretically, yes," Kira said. "But the energy barriers they use for security would interact with my phasing field and probably knock me unconscious. Even if I succeeded, I would be too exhausted to carry anything heavy like quantum processors." Marcus Webb had worked on Nexus Prime for 3 years and thought he had seen everything the sprawling interstellar trading station had to offer. The massive structure housed over 500,000 beings from dozens of different species, all working together in the complex dance of galactic commerce. As a cargo supervisor for the human administrative sector, Marcus dealt with shipments worth millions of credits every day, but nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed on that Tuesday morning in the main detention center. The young alien sat hunched in the corner of the holding cell, her translucent blue skin shifting between pale and darker hues as waves of distress rippled across her features. She belonged to the Velani species Marcus recognized from the distinctive way light seemed to bend slightly around her form even when she was completely solid. The Velani were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and craftspeople, who possessed the remarkable ability to phase shift through solid matter for brief periods. Captain, boss of station security, stood outside the cell as a reptilian, features twisted in disgust as he addressed the growing crowd of onlookers. The Krex species were known for their aggressive nature and rigid adherence to military discipline, but Voss seemed particularly hostile as he gestured at the prisoner. This thief used her unnatural abilities to steal quantum processors worth over 2 million credits from the secure tech bay. Voss announced, his voice carrying the harsh consonants typical of his species. The stolen goods were found hidden in her personal quarters. There is no question of her guilt. Marcus pushed through the crowd to get a better look at the accused. The Velani appeared to be quite young, perhaps equivalent to a human in her early 20s. Her large violet eyes darted nervously around the room, and Marcus could see fear radiating from every line of her body. When she spoke, her voice was soft and melodic, despite her obvious terror. I did not take anything she said, addressing Captain Voss directly. I work only in maintenance tunnels. I have never been to Tech Bay without proper authorization. Several beings in the crowd scoffed at her denial. A Thren merchant clicked his mandibles dismissively, while a crystalline Zephan trader's surface flickered with patterns that Marcus had learned indicated skepticism. Even his fellow humans seemed convinced of her guilt. Of course she denies it, muttered Janet Pierce, another human supervisor. These phase shifters think they can steal whatever they want and nobody can prove it. Marcus found himself studying the evidence display that Captain Voss had set up on a portable screen. The quantum processors were sophisticated pieces of technology, used in faster-than-light communication systems. They were small enough to be easily concealed and valuable enough to make theft worthwhile. The security footage showed the Velani in the area near the tech bay around the time of the theft, though the quality was poor and the timing seemed inconsistent. Something about the whole situation bothered Marcus, though he could not initially identify what was troubling him. He had dealt with enough cargo theft cases to know that evidence usually told a clearer story. The quantum processors found in the Velani's quarters were still in their original packaging and showed no signs of having been handled or examined. For someone who had supposedly risked everything to steal high-value technology, she seemed remarkably uninterested in what she had taken. "What is your name, Marcus?" asked, stepping closer to the cell. The Velani looked up at him with surprise, as if she had not expected anyone to address her directly rather than talk about her as if she were not present. "I am called Kira," she replied. "I work in Maintenance Section 7, under Supervisor Hendricks." Marcus knew Bill Hendricks well. The gruff maintenance chief was fair, but demanding, and he would not have kept an unreliable worker on his crew. Kira's claim was easy enough to verify, but nobody else seemed interested in checking her story. "How long have you worked on the station?" Marcus continued.
8 months, Kira said.
"I came here after my homeworld was attacked. I send most of my credits back to help my family in the refugee camps." This detail caught Marcus's attention. Kira was supporting family members on a maintenance worker's salary. She would have little incentive to risk her job and freedom by stealing. The risk-to-reward ratio made no sense, especially for someone from a species known for their peaceful nature. Captain Voss noticed Marcus's questions and approached with obvious irritation. "There is no need for further investigation." Webb, the Krex officer, said, "I have evidence, and confession will come soon enough. The prisoner will be transferred to detention facility on Kepler Station pending trial." "What about her right to legal representation?" Marcus asked. Station regulations require. Station regulations apply to legitimate workers, not thieves. Voss interrupted. This case is closed. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest at the casual dismissal of proper procedure. But he knew better than to challenge Captain Voss directly in front of so many witnesses. Instead, he made a mental note to look into the case further on his own time. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus caught Kira's eye through the cell bars. She looked at him with something that might have been gratitude mixed with resignation. It was clear she did not expect anyone to help her and had already accepted her fate. That evening, Marcus sat in his small apartment reviewing everything he could find about the theft case. The official report was surprisingly brief considering. The value of the stolen items, security footage was low resolution, and the timestamps seemed inconsistent with other recorded events. Most troubling was the fact that the quantum processors had been found in Kira's quarters during a search conducted. Less than 2 hours after the theft was reported, Marcus had been involved in enough investigations to know that most thieves did not keep stolen goods in their own living spaces, especially items that were small enough to be easily hidden elsewhere. The whole sequence of events suggested either remarkable stupidity on Kira's part or careful planning by someone else to frame her. He decided to visit Maintenance Section 7 the next morning to speak with Bill Hendricks about Kira's work record and behavior. If she was planning a major theft, there might have been warning signs that her supervisor had noticed. Hendricks was in his office reviewing work orders when Marcus arrived. The maintenance chief looked up with surprise since cargo. Supervisors rarely visited the lower levels of the station. "What brings you down to the dungeon, Webb?" Hendricks asked, gesturing to a chair across from his cluttered desk. "I wanted to ask about one of your workers," Marcus said. "The Velani who was arrested yesterday for theft." "Immediately, Kira," he said. "I still cannot believe it. She was one of my best workers, never missed a shift, never caused trouble. Always volunteering for extra hours, especially the overnight maintenance runs that nobody else wanted." "Did you notice any changes in her behavior recently?" Marcus asked. "Anything that might have suggested she was planning something?" "Nothing at all," Hendricks replied firmly. "If anything, she seemed more dedicated than usual, as she picked up extra shifts last month, said she needed the credits for some family emergency back home. I figured it was medical bills or something like that." Marcus made note of this detail. Kira's increased work hours would have made it even more difficult for her to plan and execute a theft, especially one requiring her to access a secure area she had no legitimate reason to visit. "Did she ever mention the tech bay or ask questions about security procedures there?" Marcus continued. "Never," Hendricks said, shaking his head. "Her work was strictly limited to maintenance tunnels and environmental systems. She did not even have access codes for the main corridors, let alone secure facilities." This was another inconsistency that bothered Marcus. If Kira lacked access to the tech bay, how had she managed to steal from it? Her phasing abilities could theoretically allow her to bypass physical barriers. But the energy requirements for sustained phasing were enormous. According to everything Marcus had read about Velani physiology, extended use of their phasing ability would leave them exhausted and potentially unconscious. "What can you tell me about her personal life?" Marcus asked. "Did she socialize with other workers, talk about her family, anything like that?" Hendricks considered this question carefully. "She kept to herself mostly, but she was always polite and helpful. A few times I heard her talking to other workers about her siblings back home. Apparently they were separated during some kind of attack on their planet and ended up in different refugee camps. She was trying to save enough credits to either bring them here or go back to help them." Marcus felt his suspicions about Kira's innocence growing stronger. Everything he learned about her painted a picture of someone focused on survival and family obligation, not criminal activity. He thanked Hendricks for his time and headed back to his own office to dig deeper into the case files. The security footage from the tech bay was stored on the station's main computer system, which Marcus had legitimate access to as part of his cargo supervision duties. He pulled up the files from the day of the theft and began studying them frame by frame. This technical information was exactly what Marcus needed to challenge the official theory of the crime. If Kira's phasing abilities were as limited as she described, then the theft scenario that's presented by Captain Voss was physically impossible. Marcus. We spent another few minutes gathering details about Kira's life on the station, then promised to visit her again as soon as he had more information. As he left the detention center, he felt both hope and dread about what his investigation might reveal. His next stop was Tom Bradley's office in the administrative sector. Bradley was a mid-level bureaucrat, responsible for personnel management and financial transactions for non-human workers. Marcus had dealt with him occasionally and found him to be competent, but somewhat cold in his interactions with alien species. Bradley's office was neat and organized with multiple screens, displaying various administrative data streams. He looked up when Marcus knocked on his door and gestured for him to enter. Marcus, Bradley said with false warmth, "What brings you to my corner of the bureaucracy?" "I wanted to ask about one of your clients," Marcus said, settling into a chair across from Bradley's desk. "The Velani worker who was arrested for theft." Bradley's expression became guarded. "Kira," he said. "Terrible business that. I never would have expected something like that from her." "You knew her well?" Marcus asked. "Well enough," Bradley replied. "She came to me several months ago asking about credit transfer regulations. Apparently she was trying to send money back to family members on her homeworld. I helped her set up the proper authorizations." Marcus nodded as if this was routine information. "Did she seem desperate for money when you spoke with her?" Bradley hesitated slightly before answering. "She was concerned about her family's situation, but I would not say desperate. She seemed willing to work hard and save credits gradually, rather than looking for quick solutions." This answer contradicted the image of someone who might turn to theft out of financial desperation. Marcus pressed a little further. "Did anyone else ask you about Kira's financial situation or family circumstances?" he asked. "Why would anyone ask about that?" Bradley responded with what seemed like genuine confusion. Marcus realized he needed to be more careful about his questions to avoid revealing the direction of his investigation. He made some general comments about the case and left Bradley's office without learning anything definitive. His next step was to examine the quantum processors that had supposedly been stolen, as evidence in an ongoing case they were being held in the security department's evidence locker. Marcus did not have official access to examine them, but he knew someone who might be able to help. Detective Lisa Park was a human investigator who worked for the station's civilian law enforcement division. She handled cases involving disputes between different species and had a reputation for thoroughness and fairness. Marcus had worked with her on several cargo theft cases and respected her professional judgment. Park's office was located in the civilian law enforcement sector away from Captain Voss's military security operation. She was reviewing case files when Marcus arrived and looked up with a smile of recognition. "Ah, Marcus," she said. "I heard you have been asking questions about the Velani theft case. That is Captain Voss's jurisdiction, so I have been staying out of it." "I am here," Marcus said. "I have some concerns about the evidence, and I was hoping you might be willing to take a look at it from an investigative perspective." Park leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus with sharp, intelligent eyes. "What kind of concerns?" she asked. Marcus presented his evidence about the timestamp discrepancies and the inconsistencies in Kira's alleged method of theft. Park listened carefully and asked several technical questions that demonstrated her understanding of the issues involved. "Have identified some genuine problems with the case," Park said when Marcus finished his presentation. "But you realize that challenging Captain Voss on this could have serious consequences for your career." "I understand the risks," Marcus replied. "But if we let an innocent being go to prison because we are afraid to ask difficult questions, then we are not much better than the criminals we are supposed to be stopping." Park nodded approvingly. "I respect that attitude," she said. "Let me see what I can find out about the evidence without stepping on too many toes." 2 days later, Park contacted Marcus with disturbing news. Her examination of the quantum processors had revealed several anomalies that suggested they had been planted in Kira's quarters rather than hidden there by her. The devices show fingerprint traces from multiple species, Park explained during their meeting in her office. But the Velani prints are only on the outer packaging, not on the devices themselves. If she had stolen them and examined them, there should be traces on the actual processors. Furthermore, Park had discovered that the quantum processors were part of a larger shipment that had arrived on the station only 2 days before the theft. The timing suggested that whoever stole them had inside knowledge of the shipment's schedule and access to secure storage areas. "This is looking more and more like an inside job," Park said. "Someone with legitimate access took the processors and planted them in the Velani's quarters to cover their tracks." Marcus felt vindicated by Park's findings, but also worried about what they implied. If someone within the station's administration or security apparatus was involved in the theft, then Kira was not just an innocent victim. She was a potential witness who could expose a larger conspiracy. "We need to move fast," Marcus said. "Kira is scheduled to be transferred tomorrow morning, and once she leaves the station, it will be much harder to prove her innocence." Park nodded grimly. "I can try to delay the transfer, but I will need compelling evidence to justify overriding Captain Voss's authority." They agreed to meet early the next morning to plan their next moves. As Marcus left Park's office, he felt both hope and fear about what they might discover if they continued digging into the case. That evening, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his apartment. Tom Bradley stood outside his door looking nervous and agitated. "I need to talk to you about the Velani case," Bradley said without preamble. When Marcus opened the door, Marcus invited him inside, wondering what had prompted this late-night visit. Bradley seemed reluctant to sit down and paced nervously around the small living area. "I heard you have been asking questions about Kira's case," Bradley said. "I want you to know that you are getting involved in something dangerous." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Bradley stopped pacing and looked directly at Marcus. "There are people on this station who do not want that case investigated too closely," he said. "People with the power to make life very difficult for anyone who causes problems." Marcus felt his pulse quickening. Bradley's warning sounded like it could be either a threat or a genuine concern for his safety. "Are you telling me that Kira is actually guilty?" Marcus asked. "I am telling you that sometimes it does not matter whether someone is guilty or innocent," Bradley replied. "Sometimes it only matters that certain people want them to be guilty." With that cryptic statement, Bradley headed for the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back at Marcus with what might have been sympathy. "You seem like a decent man, Marcus," he said. "Do not let your conscience get you killed." After Bradley left, Marcus sat alone in his apartment trying to process what he had just heard. The warning had been vague, but the implication was clear. Someone powerful wanted Kira convicted and was willing to use intimidation to prevent interference with that goal. Marcus considered abandoning his investigation and letting events take their course. He had already done more than most people would to help someone he barely knew, and he had his own career and safety to consider. But every time he thought about giving up, he remembered Kira's tears and her worry about her family. He spent a restless night weighing his options, and by morning, had decided to continue his investigation. Despite the risks, if someone was threatening him, it meant he was getting close to the truth, and backing down now would guarantee that an innocent being would suffer for someone else's crimes. Marcus met Detective Park at her office early the next morning to plan their strategy for delaying Kira's transfer. Park had spent the night reviewing security protocols and believed she had found a legal basis for requesting additional investigation time. "I can file a motion claiming that new evidence has come. To light that requires further examination," Park explained. "It will not stop the transfer indefinitely, but it should buy us a few days." They were interrupted by an urgent message from the detention center. Kira had collapsed in her cell during the night and was being treated in the station's medical facility. The cause of her condition was unknown, but it would certainly delay her transfer. Marcus and Park rushed to the medical center where they found Dr. Elizabeth Hayes examining Kira, who appeared to be unconscious on a diagnostic table. Hayes was one of the few doctors on the station who specialized in treating multiple species, and her expression was troubled. "What happened to her?" Marcus asked. Dr. Hayes looked up with concern. "She appears to have been poisoned," she said. "Found traces of a neurotoxin in her system that is specifically designed to affect Velani physiology." Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. Someone had tried to kill Kira to prevent her from potentially revealing information that could expose the real criminals. "Will she recover?" Park asked. I believe so, Dr. Hayes replied.
But she was very
Close to dying. A few more hours and the toxin would have caused irreversible damage to her nervous system. Marcus realized that Kira's life was still in danger as long as she remained on the station. Whoever had tried to kill her would likely try again once they learned she had survived. Can you keep her condition secret for now, Marcus? Asked Dr. Hayes. If certain people think she is still dying, they might not try to finish the job immediately. Dr. Hayes looked puzzled by the request, but agreed to limit information about Kira's condition to essential personnel only. Marcus and Park left the medical center with grim determination, knowing they were now racing against time to expose the conspiracy before another attempt was made on Kira's life. Their investigation took on new urgency as they realized the stakes had escalated from simple theft to attempted murder. Park used her law enforcement credentials to access security records while Marcus leveraged his cargo supervisor position to examine shipping manifests and personnel files. What they discovered over the next few hours painted a disturbing picture of corruption that reached higher into the station hierarchy than either had imagined. The quantum processors were part of a larger pattern of missing high-value technology that had been disappearing from the station over several months. The items were small enough to be easily concealed and valuable enough to generate significant profits on the black market. Marcus found evidence that someone had been manipulating shipping records to hide the thefts. Cargo manifests showed discrepancies between what was received and what was officially logged into station inventory. The missing items included not just quantum processors, but also advanced sensors, medical equipment, and even some restricted military components. Detective Park's examination of security footage revealed something even more troubling. The same individuals appeared near multiple theft locations over several months, but the footage had been edited to obscure their identities. The editing was sophisticated and would have required advanced technical skills and administrative access to the security system. This is a professional operation, Park said as they reviewed the evidence together. We are not dealing with opportunistic thieves, but with an organized conspiracy that has been operating for months. Marcus nodded grimly. They needed a scapegoat to take the blame when things got too hot. Kira was perfect because her phasing abilities seemed like a plausible suspect, and her alien status meant fewer people would question her guilt. They spent the afternoon trying to identify the individuals involved in the conspiracy. The edited security footage made direct identification difficult, but Park was able to enhance some images enough to narrow down the possibilities. What they found was shocking. Tom Bradley appeared in several enhanced images near theft locations. His administrative access would have allowed him to manipulate records, and his knowledge of personnel files would have helped him select Kira as a target. But Bradley seemed to be working with others, including at least one member of the security department. We need to be very careful about how we proceed, Park warned. If Bradley is involved and he has allies in security, then we could be walking into a trap, Marcus agreed, but pointed out that they had little choice. Kira almost died last night, he said. If we do not expose this conspiracy soon, they will find another way to eliminate her. They decided to gather more evidence before confronting anyone directly. Park used her law enforcement access to examine financial records while Marcus investigated the supply chain for the stolen items. What they found confirmed their worst fears about the scope of the conspiracy. The stolen technology was being sold to buyers in the outer colonies, some of whom were known to have connections to pirate organizations and illegal weapons manufacturers. The profits were substantial enough to justify significant risks, including murder if necessary, to protect the operation. Financial records showed suspicious transfers from accounts connected to Tom Bradley and at least 2 other station personnel. The amounts were consistent with profits from selling high-value technology, and the timing corresponded with known thefts. As evening approached, Marcus and Park realized they had enough evidence to expose the conspiracy, but they faced a critical decision about how to proceed. Going through official channels risked alerting the conspirators and giving them time to destroy evidence or eliminate witnesses. But acting independently could put both their careers and their lives at risk. We need to get Kira somewhere safe before we make any moves, Marcus said. As long as she is in the medical center, she is vulnerable to another assassination attempt. Nodded, but pointed out the practical difficulties. Moving her without authorization will make us fugitives, she said. We do not have anywhere secure to hide her. Marcus had been thinking about this problem and believed he had a solution. The cargo bays in Section 12 are rarely used except for emergency storage, he said. I have access codes and we could hide her there temporarily while we figure out our next move. It was a desperate plan, but they could not think of better alternatives. They returned to the medical center to check on Kira's condition and found Dr. Hayes preparing to release her back to detention. Her vital signs have stabilized and the toxin has been neutralized, Hayes explained. But she will need several days of rest to fully recover. Marcus exchanged glances with Park, knowing they could not allow Kira to return to detention where she would be vulnerable to another attack. They explained the situation to Dr. Hayes, who was horrified to learn about the assassination attempt. I cannot officially authorize her release, Hayes said. But if she were to leave on her own while I was dealing with an emergency in another section, I might not notice for several hours. They gratefully accepted the doctor's tacit cooperation and waited for an opportunity to move Kira safely. Hayes stepped out to handle a minor medical emergency. Marcus and Park helped Kira to her feet and began moving toward the service corridors that led to the cargo areas. Kira was weak from the poisoning but able to walk with assistance. As they made their way through the dimly lit maintenance passages, Marcus explained what they had discovered about the conspiracy and the danger she faced. They tried to kill me, Kira said with disbelief. But why would they go so far just to cover up theft? Because this is not just about theft, Park explained. The stolen technology is being sold to dangerous buyers who could use it for weapons or other illegal purposes. Your case was supposed to close the investigation, but when Marcus started asking questions, they decided to eliminate you permanently. They reached the cargo bay without incident, and Marcus used his access codes to open the sealed storage area. The space was large enough to be comfortable and had basic life support systems, but it was hardly luxurious accommodations. I know this is not ideal, Marcus said, as they helped Kira settle onto some folded cargo blankets. But it is safe, and we should be able to resolve this situation within a few days. Kira looked around the sterile cargo bay with resignation. It is better than being dead, she said with grim humor. What happens now? Marcus and Park explained their plan to expose the conspiracy by presenting their evidence to higher authorities outside the station's normal chain of command. They would contact the Galactic Trade Commission directly and request an independent investigation. The problem is that we need to survive long enough for the investigation to proceed, Park said. Once we make our accusations, the conspirators will know their operation has been exposed, and they may become desperate. They spent the next few hours organizing their evidence and preparing a comprehensive report for the Trade Commission. Marcus remained with Kira, while Park returned to her office to submit the report through secure channels. Alone with Kira, in the cargo bay, Marcus found himself studying her more closely than he had before. Despite everything she had endured, she maintained a quiet dignity that he found impressive. Her translucent skin had regained some of its normal coloration, and her violet eyes showed intelligence and determination rather than the fear he had seen in detention. Why did you help me? Kira asked suddenly. You barely know me, and defending me has put you in danger. Marcus considered the question carefully. I suppose I could not stand by and watch an innocent person be destroyed by a corrupt system, he said. My father always taught me that doing the right thing is more important than doing the safe thing. Era nodded as if this explanation made sense to her. On my world, we have a saying that translates roughly to the bonds we choose are stronger than the bonds we inherit. I think your father would approve of the bond you have chosen with justice. Their conversation was interrupted by Park's return with disturbing news. Her attempts to contact the Trade Commission had been blocked by what appeared to be administrative interference. Someone with high-level access was preventing outside communication about the case. The conspiracy reaches higher than we thought, Park said grimly. We may not be able to rely on official channels to resolve this. Marcus felt a chill of fear as he realized how isolated they had become. With official channels compromised and powerful enemies working against them, their options were rapidly diminishing. Maybe we should try a different approach, Marcus suggested. Instead of working through official channels, we could make the evidence public through the station's communication system. Park looked intrigued by this idea. A general broadcast would be hard to stop or suppress, she said. And if we timed it during a major trade conference, when the station is full of representatives from different worlds, it would be impossible to cover up. Kira listened to their discussion with growing excitement. I might be able to help with that, she said. My maintenance work gave me access to communication relay stations throughout the station. I know how to bypass normal administrative controls. Spent the rest of the night planning their strategy for exposing the conspiracy through a public broadcast. It would be extremely dangerous since they would be directly challenging powerful enemies, but it seemed like their only remaining option. Next morning brought news that made their situation even more urgent. Dr. Hayes contacted them through a secure channel to report that Captain Voss had been asking questions about Kira's condition and seemed suspicious about her disappearance from the medical center. He knows she is missing, Hayes reported, and he has ordered security sweeps of the entire station. It is only a matter of time before they find your hiding place. Marcus realized they would have to act immediately before their enemies could track them down. They gathered their evidence and prepared to make their way to the communication center where they could broadcast their findings to the entire station. The communication center was located in the upper levels of the station near the main command. Areas getting there would require moving through heavily trafficked corridors where they might be recognized and captured. But they had no choice except to risk everything on this final desperate gambit. Kira insisted on accompanying them despite her weakened condition. You need my technical knowledge to access the communication system, she argued. And I have the right to face my accusers when the truth is revealed. They left the cargo bay in the early morning when station traffic was at its lightest. Marcus and Park flanked Kira as they made their way through service corridors toward the upper levels. Every shadow seemed to hide potential enemies, and every sound made them freeze with fear. Their progress was slow but steady until they reached the transition point between the lower maintenance areas and the main station corridors. A security checkpoint blocked their path, with 2 guards scanning identification cards and searching packages. We cannot go through there, Park whispered. Those guards will recognize Kira immediately and arrest all of us. Marcus studied the checkpoint, looking for alternatives. The security station was built into a narrow corridor with no obvious bypasses, but he noticed that the ceiling panels looked removable. Can you phase through the ceiling? He asked Kira quietly. She examined the structure carefully before nodding. I think so, she said. But I will only have enough energy for one attempt, and I will be exhausted afterward. They waited for a moment when the guards were distracted by a group of Thren merchants passing through the checkpoint. Kira closed her eyes and concentrated as her form began to shimmer and become translucent. 8. She rose slowly through the ceiling. Panel disappearing from view, Marcus and Park waited anxiously for several minutes before hearing a soft tapping sound from above. Kira had made it through and was signaling for them to follow. They climbed through an access panel she had opened and found themselves in the maintenance, spaced above the security checkpoint. Kira was pale and trembling from the effort of phasing, but managed a weak smile. That was the easy part, she said. The communication center will have much better security. They continued through the maintenance passages toward the communication center with Kira, providing guidance based on her knowledge of the station's infrastructure. The passages were cramped and poorly lit, but they offered concealment from the security forces that were undoubtedly searching for them. As they approached the communication center, they could hear voices and activity from the main corridors below. A major trade conference was beginning, which meant the station was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. If they could successfully broadcast their evidence, it would reach thousands of witnesses who could not be silenced or intimidated. Communication Center was protected by multiple layers of security, including armed guards, automated sensors, and restricted access codes. Getting inside would require all of their combined skills and a considerable amount of luck. Marcus used his administrative access to disable some of the automated security systems, while Park created a distraction by triggering a false emergency alert in a different section of the station. In the confusion that followed, Kira was able to phase through the reinforced door of the communication center and unlock it from the inside. They slipped into the communication center and began working frantically to access the broadcast systems. The equipment was more complex than Marcus had expected, and they struggled to understand the proper procedures for initiating a station-wide transmission. "I can activate the emergency broadcast system," Kira said, as she studied the control panels. "But it will trigger automatic alerts, and security will respond within minutes." "Do it," Marcus said. "You only need a few minutes to present the evidence." Kira's fingers moved swiftly over the control surfaces as she activated the emergency broadcast system. Warning lights began flashing throughout the communication center, and an automated voice announced that an emergency transmission was beginning. Marcus stepped in front of the main camera and began speaking as clearly and calmly as he could manage despite his racing heart. He identified himself and explained that he was presenting evidence of a conspiracy involving theft of valuable technology and the framing of an innocent worker. As he spoke, Park operated the visual displays showing the evidence they had gathered, including the manipulated security footage, financial records, and shipping manifests. The presentation was necessarily brief, but it covered all the essential points of their investigation. "The being accused of this crime is innocent," Marcus said directly to the camera. "She has been poisoned and nearly killed to prevent her from exposing the truth. The real criminals are members of this station's own administration and security forces who have been stealing technology and selling it to illegal buyers." Kira stepped into view of the camera as Marcus continued his presentation. Despite her obvious weakness, she spoke with quiet dignity about her experience and her determination to seek justice not just for herself, but for others who might be victimized by corruption. Their broadcast was interrupted by the sound of explosions and weapons fire from the corridor. Outside the communication center, Captain Voss and his security forces had arrived and were attempting to break through the reinforced door. "We are running out of time," Park said urgently. "Is there anything else we need to broadcast?" Marcus looked directly into the camera for his final statement. "The evidence speaks for itself," he said. "We ask only that you judge fairly and demand accountability from those who abuse their power." The door to the communication center exploded inward as Captain Voss and his armed security team stormed into the room. The Krex officer's reptilian features were twisted with rage as he pointed his weapon at Marcus.
"Ow."
"Equipment," Voss ordered. "You're all under arrest for inciting panic and interfering with official investigations." "The broadcast has already been transmitted," Marcus replied calmly. "Thousands of beings throughout the station have seen the evidence. You cannot suppress the truth anymore." Voss's expression became even more furious as he realized the implications of what Marcus had said. The conspiracy was now exposed, and there would be demands for investigation from multiple worlds and species represented at the trade conference. "The truth is whatever I say it is," Voss snarled. "And I say you are terrorists who have fabricated evidence to undermine station security." Before Voss could act on his threats, the communication center filled with the sound of additional footsteps and voices. Commander Mitchell entered with a team of civilian investigators and representatives from several alien governments who had been attending the trade conference. Captain Voss Mitchell said firmly, "You will stand down immediately. These allegations are being taken very seriously by the Galactic Trade Commission, and there will be a full investigation." Voss looked around the room, realizing that his position had become untenable. The broadcast had created too many witnesses and too much political pressure for him to simply eliminate the evidence and continue with business as usual. "This is a military matter," Voss protested. "Civilian authorities have no jurisdiction over station security." "Station security serves the interests of galactic trade," replied Ambassador Thrin, a tall crystalline being who represented one of the major trading coalitions. "Security forces themselves become criminals. They forfeit any claim to authority." The standoff continued for several tense minutes as more officials arrived to assess the situation. Marcus, Park, and Kira remained near the broadcast equipment, surrounded by armed security forces but protected by the growing crowd of witnesses. And investigators, finally Commander Mitchell, took charge of the situation. "Captain Voss, you are relieved of duty pending investigation," she announced. "All evidence related to this case will be secured by civilian authorities, and there will be a full review of security procedures." Voss's allies among the security forces looked uncertain as they realized the political winds had shifted against them. One by one, they lowered their weapons and stepped back, allowing the civilian investigators to take control of the scene. Marcus felt a tremendous wave of relief as he realized they had succeeded in exposing the conspiracy. The immediate danger was over, and Kira would finally receive the fair investigation she deserved. Over the following days, the investigation revealed the full scope of the criminal operation that had been hidden within the station's administration. Tom Bradley was arrested, along with several other officials who had been involved in stealing and selling advanced technology. The network reached into multiple departments and had been operating for over a year. Captain Voss was found to have been both a participant in the conspiracy and its primary enforcer, using his security position to intimidate potential witnesses and suppress investigations. His attempt to frame Kira had been part of a broader pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals who could serve as convenient scapegoats. The stolen technology had indeed been sold to buyers in the outer colonies, including some who were using it to manufacture illegal weapons and surveillance equipment. The investigation led to arrests and seizures across multiple star systems as the full criminal network was unraveled. Kira was completely exonerated of all charges and received both an official apology and substantial compensation for her ordeal. The medical treatment for her poisoning was provided at station expense, and she was offered protection during the investigation and trial process. For Marcus, the aftermath of the case brought both recognition and controversy. He was praised by civilian authorities and alien representatives for his courage in exposing corruption, but some of his human colleagues viewed him as a troublemaker who had betrayed his own species by defending an alien. Detective Park received commendation for her professional investigation and was promoted to head the new interspecies crimes division that was created in response to the scandal. Her work had been instrumental in documenting the evidence that made prosecution possible. As the legal proceedings continued, Marcus found himself spending more time with Kira, helping her navigate the complex process of testifying against her former accusers. He was impressed by her resilience and determination to see justice done not just for herself but for others who had been victimized. "I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else," Kira told him during one of their conversations. "Too many innocent beings suffer when powerful people abuse their authority." Marcus shared her commitment to preventing future injustices, and they began working together on reforms to station policies and procedures. Their partnership proved effective as Marcus's understanding of human administrative systems complemented Kira's technical knowledge and insight into alien perspectives.